Hi, my name's Mike Montgomery, and welcome to episode 2 of my shed to workshop conversion series. Last episode, we demoed out and repaired the old shed on my new property, and we built out this modern plywood interior with these awesome polycarbonate windows on the high side of the ceilings. And in today's episode, we are painting everything on modern builds. Before we get building, I'd like to give a big thanks to the sponsor of today's episode, Ariat Workwear, since I'm going to be spending a lot of time in painting clothes. Ariat Workwear is made for people who work all day and is built to last. The Modern Build Starter Pack consists of the 8-inch Cascade boot, M8 cut jeans, and the Rebar Cotton Strong work tee. Oh, and don't forget the Dura Canvas jacket for when it's cold. The Rebar Cotton Strong t-shirts are great. I've got a few. They're made from 6-ounce heavyweight cotton and have a drop tail hem to prevent plumber's crack. Now that is super pro. I'll be sure to leave a link down in the description to my landing page on Ariat's website where I've got all of my favorites, including the items in the Modern Build Starter Pack. Also, be sure to sign up to Ariat's email list for 10% off your first purchase. Now let's get building. First things first, I wanted to protect the new concrete floors, so I got some help from my friend Rachel Metz, and we laid down some construction paper and taped everything off. After that, I could proceed with my favorite part of any painting project, which is putting on the suit. And I think I rocked it. Okay, maybe not. I'm gonna be applying a coat of Kills 3 primer with my Wagner Control Pro 150 sprayer before I apply any paint. I made sure to do a test to make sure that the sprayer was working right, and then once I knew it was game time. So many of y'all know that this is only my second time using an airless sprayer on a large project like this, so I'm by no means an expert, but I did learn a couple of tips that helped me get good results, and here they are. First, you want to make sure that your sprayer is square or perpendicular to the wall that you're painting. That way, your fan is consistent from top to bottom. Second, you want to be about 8 to 12 inches away from the wall. That way you get good coverage. Tip number 3, make sure and overlap each pass by about half. And my fourth and final beginner sprayer tip is to make sure and stop the sprayer before starting the next row. It's really tempting to want to move fast and keep the sprayer running between passes, but if you don't start and stop, that paint can build up on the end of each run and cause, you guessed it, runs. It was pretty fun and tricky getting into all of the nooks and crannies around the polycarbonate windows. If you remember from last episode, I kept the plastic sheeting on the inside of the polycarbonate panels, and that's what's masking everything off right now. Later we'll take it off, and I'm happy to report that it worked. I lined the interior walls of my shed workshop with 1/2-inch plywood, so I just took these walls in 4-foot wide sections, doing one panel at a time. And here you can really see how the paint overlapped each panel a little bit. At this point in the project, I'd been using the Wagner Control Pro 150 for a little while, and I was starting to get a good feel for it. And man, I'm always surprised at how quickly projects move when you use a sprayer instead of rolling paint on. Wagner is an amazing sponsor of mine, but I'm always going to give candid feedback. I ran this sprayer from sunup to sundown, and it worked great for me. The pump was consistent, and I never had any runs or drips that weren't my fault. So it turns out painting the ceiling is a very similar process to painting the walls. The only difference is I had to carry around a step stool with me and be a lot more aware of where my overspray was going. That way I didn't make it rain on myself. You don't want to do that. And I don't know what it was about this center beam. I put on a few coats of primer and a few coats of paint on top of that, and I still had that dark color trying to bleed through. Crazy. As I was finishing up the primer coat on the ceiling, and getting this awesome shot, I was thinking to myself how cool it was that I was able to apply all of the primer on the walls and the ceiling in just a few hours. And this was so much less work than what rolling on all of this primer would be.
Primer is done! Woo!
Okay, wow, the primer looks amazing. It's almost clean enough to leave as is, but I want to apply at least one proper coat of a flat white finish. The Wagner Control Pro 150 did an awesome job. The coats went on super thick and I didn't get any runs that weren't my fault. I thinned down the primer a little bit just because Kills 3 is so thick. I think if I used original Kills, I wouldn't have thinned it at all. So right now it's like 4:30 in the afternoon, but it's the middle of winter here in Joshua Tree, so I want to make the most of the rest of the day. I've got my Goal Zero Yeti 3000 hooked up. It's what I've been running the paint sprayer on, but I'm also hooking up a lot of lights so we can keep filming. As night fell and the primer had time to dry, it exposed some inconsistencies in my wall. Here in the corner you can see a gap between my plywood panels, so I ran a bead of latex caulk to clean everything up, and I used a wet paper towel to smooth that bead out. After that, I could bring in the paint, and I'm gonna be using Ultra Pure White in Flat by Behr. This is what you get right off the shelf.
Let's do this.
My favorite thing about the Wagner Control Pro 150 is that it pulls directly from 1 gallon or 5 gallon buckets. This means less time prepping and more time spraying. Even though I was spraying flat white onto this white primer, it was really easy to see what I had already sprayed and how good my coverage is in real life. You can see it pretty well on camera, but the glossiness between the wet paint and the dry paint was really obvious. Since my primer method of doing one panel at a time gave me good results, I decided not to fix what wasn't broken, so I did the same thing on my walls and on the ceiling. And here's my quick public service announcement for all the safety police out there. Make sure and wear a good respirator rated for spraying paint with. After the ceiling was done, I realized I had forgot to paint the doors, and so after I closed up the shot for the day, I pulled the sprayer back out and I took care of it before calling it a wrap. So now that the walls and the ceilings both have 2 coats of flat white paint, it's time to tackle the floor. First, I removed the construction paper from the floor, and it was really cool seeing the contrast between the raw concrete and these new white walls instead of the white overspray on everything. So before I moved on, I just took a moment and soaked it all in. Man, everything was looking really good so far. I also took some time to remove the plastic lining on the inside of the polycarbonate to let all of that natural fill light in, and it looked even better after that.
This looks amazing.
So the shed shop is really coming along, but to round it all out, I want to apply a coat of this garage epoxy floor coating onto the concrete pad. As you remember, even though this is new concrete, I did not do the best job getting a perfect finish. Overall, it's great and it's functional, but it's just got more inconsistencies than a professional finish. And all of these little chips will hopefully break up those inconsistencies. Let's find out. I bought the 2.5 car kit that comes with your chips, the epoxy, and this concrete etch that helps clean everything and bond better. First, you'll want to make sure and wet down your concrete and let that soak in for a little bit. Then you can mix up this concrete etch, and you'll want it to be pretty concentrated. The directions recommended using a bristle brush to scrub down the concrete, but I wasn't going to make a whole Home Depot trip just for that since I forgot to buy one. So I used a foam brush, and that worked pretty well. You can see just how dirty this water that I'm pushing around is. Once you've scrubbed your floor and before it has time to dry, you'll want to rinse it clean using a garden hose. After that, I applied some masking paper around the base of the walls. That way I didn't get this concrete epoxy all over my fresh plywood. This epoxy has a 2-part pouch that bursts open, allowing you to mix everything up in the pouch. As with any epoxy product, it's important you mix this thoroughly and follow the directions.
Oh no! Well, I guess it's a good thing this is going on the floor anyways. Wow.
So disaster avoided. I'm glad that I poured the paint where I did. All in all, the Rustoleum Garage Floor Kit goes on really easily. You'll want to use a 3/4 inch nap roller, and it's definitely easier to cut in on all of your corners before rolling the rest of the epoxy on. I spread on a thick coat of this epoxy knowing that I've got a 1.5 car garage sized shed, and I've got a 2.5 car garage kit. That meant I had a lot of extra epoxy and a lot of extra chips. So I made sure to throw heavy to get the desired look that I wanted. But when it comes to the chips, I found that it's a lot easier throwing up than sideways. Otherwise, they tend to gather up and cluster. Just like using the airless sprayer earlier, this was my second time applying this Rustoleum Garage flooring kit. The first time I did it was at my parents' place in their garage. That's the same space that I built out the really cool 2x4 garage storage and workbench solution. From building out that space and building in that garage for about a year, I found that this product has really good durability and it doesn't stain very easily. Rustoleum is not currently a sponsor, but if you ever want to be, shoot me an email.
All right, we are officially halfway through our kit, and it's time to open up the second batch. I'm gonna be a little more careful this time. Don't take this.
You want to make sure and work in sections that aren't so large that you can't throw the chips and have them disperse evenly. You also want to make sure that each of your sections overlap by 6 or 12 inches, that way they blend together.
Ooh, this is working pretty good. That's a new technique. It's like snowfall. Take cancer. Yeah, anybody gets these, you can really go heavy with the chips. I barely used more than half. I think it looks great. All right, I think that does it. Let's check back tomorrow morning and see how it looks.
So let's take a trip back to the shed on day 1. It was closed in, it was claustrophobic, it didn't even have a concrete floor. Now we can fast forward to where we got it in episode 1. It was looking clean and we let a lot more light into the space with these new windows. But now, let's check out these afters. Wow. Can I just leave it at that? Because this shed is incredible. I don't even feel good calling it a shed anymore. It is now the workshop. I'm so happy that I went with flat white. It provides a much softer glow throughout the space and it films better. I got a couple of runs here and there, but that was from me being heavy-handed. All in all, the Wagner Control Pro 150 did amazing. Highly recommended. And down on the floor, this concrete epoxy coating looks so fresh. I've already shot a ton of Modern Builds videos on a floor just like this, so I love the idea of carrying that theme into the new workshop.
So as always, thanks a ton for watching. Make sure and click that subscribe and notification bell and follow me on Instagram. There's a lot more coming in this Shed to Workshop series. We'll see you then on Modern Builds. Bye, everybody.